Welcome back to Making Messes. I'm Jamie Harwood and thanks for joining me here in my craft space. It's November now, and so this is about the time of year that I start shifting from my regular, ordinary, everyday crafting into some serious Christmas crafting. I usually craft through a big chunk of November and into December all the way up until Christmas, making things for my tree, for my home decor, and for friends. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to show you how to make 3 different ornaments that you can actually use to hang onto your tree. You could turn them into garland. You can do just about anything you'd like with them. So there are some things that you're going to need. First and foremost is some Christmas fabric. Etsy, as always, comes through for me, and I can find pretty much any type of fabric that I want there. So that's where these have come from. You're going to need some scissors or a rotary cutter. Either one will be used quite a bit, so you will need those. Gonna need a needle and a thread because there is a little bit of hand sewing for one of them, not very much. You're gonna need a plate. It can be any size that you want. It's really gonna depend on how large you want a couple of your ornaments. You're gonna need a handy dandy iron. I'm gonna use my little mini press from Cricut. And you'll need a glue gun. This is my favorite glue gun of all time. I'll talk to you more about that later. So that's pretty much all that you're gonna need. You will need a sewing machine for 2 of the ornaments. The first ornament is no sew. All it is some folding and a little bit of ironing. So that'll be super easy. And the following 2 only have a little bit of sewing to them. So if you can sew a straight line or a curved line, you're good to go. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to begin with the no sew ornament. This will just involve folding. And to prepare to make this ornament, what I've done is I've cut 4 strips of kind of coordinating Christmas fabric. Obviously my reds don't match, but life doesn't match either, so it doesn't really bother me when my fabric doesn't match. So I have cut these into 12-inch long and 3-inch wide strips, and there are 4 of them. Now, these are too wide for what we're eventually going to be making, so we need to do a little bit of ironing to get them down to the size that we want them to be. So in order to do that, the first thing you're going to do is you're just going to take this and you're going to fold it in half. And then I'm going to take my handy dandy little iron. And I'm really just folding that in half because I want to create a line that I've got this center line, I'm now going to fold this up to that center line. Iron again. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Take it straight up to that original line in the middle. I'm going to fold it again, or excuse me, iron it again. So now that I have both of these pieces folded into the middle, I'm going to then fold it in half again. Now what this does is it gives me no raw edges on the outside. They're all tucked in nicely into the middle of your strip. And so you are going to do that for all 4. Again, folding it in half first, just to give yourself that center line. And folding both sides in. The other side. and then in half again. I will fast forward through the last two so you aren't spending your time watching me iron. There you have your 4 strips. We're ready for our next step, which is to fold these over. Now, when you fold them, you want to leave about an inch or so at the very end. So they're slightly off. And then you're just going to press them again. I do that to all 4. I use my first one to kind of use it as kind of a gauge for the rest of my strips. I mentioned that there weren't any raw edges because of the way you folded it, but obviously there are on the very ends. But those are going to be tucked in as we're doing our folding, and so you're never going to see any of that. And our last one. Okay, so we have all 4 of these done. Let's go on to our next step. Okay, so we have our 4 strips, and now what we're going to do is we're going to begin to put them into a grid. So you want to have your short ends on top. What you're going to do is you're going to take the first one, you're going to open it up, and you're going to take the second one and put it in like that. See how I did that? Open it up, place this one inside. Now we're going to take another one and we're going to take this folded edge, match it up to this uneven edge. We're going to place that inside as well. Again, keeping the shorter one on top. Now we're going to take this one, take the folded edge towards the raw edge. Shorter layer is on top. You're going to tuck that right in there as well. And then with this raw edge on this last one, you're going to lift this up and tuck this through here. Oops. So you're going to end up with something that looks like this. Let me do that one more time just to make sure you got it. So you're going to take your raw edge and your folded edge. Take a second one, and your raw edges are always going to be tucked in to your folded edge. So I have that one there. This one again, here's your folded edge. Here's the raw edge. We're just going to fold this like that. Remember, shorter edges on top. And then this last one, we've got the folded edge, the raw edge. So that's just going to be tucked right in there. And then this raw edge is going to get tucked into this folded edge. So again, you end up with a square. Now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to tighten this up and make it into a grid. And really you just kind of have to play with it. You do want to make sure that you're not pulling your shorter ends over to the top of your longer ends. You want to try to keep the fold that you pressed into it where you originally pressed it. When you're closer to having the grid formed, it gets a little easier. When you're first starting, you're really trying to manipulate it. So what you've done is you've tightened these, and you want to have a pretty tight grid, as you can see here, but you don't want to have it so tight that it's starting to fold over your fabric or anything. So as you can see, we've tightened that up. We still have the shorter sides on top. And we have this nice little 4-square grid. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to flip this over. Oops. So that now your long sides are on top. And what you want to do is basically just start at the top, and you're going to fold this down even with the top of this grid. Then you're going to go, in my case, I'm going to go counterclockwise. I'm going to fold this top one over. Then I'm going to take the bottom one, fold that one up and over. And then I have this one. You're going to fold it over. But for this last one, you're also going to lift it up right here, and you're going to tuck this under and pull it through. You're going to tighten up again. As you can see, you now have a grid on this side. Sometimes just to keep things nice and crisp, I'll just come in and kind of iron over the top of that just to make it nice and crisp, as I said. Again, you don't want it so tight that it's crumpling up your fabric, but you do want it pretty tight. Now this is where we're going to begin the folding. A lot of times when you do this, these will be equal lengths. As you can see, these are almost equal lengths, these are not. I have given you excess fabric, so that's not really going to make any difference in the long run. So I think I'm going to try to get the camera just a little bit closer for you, so you can see how this folding goes. So I'm going to start up here with this top one here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it into a triangle, as you can see. Again, just fold it into a triangle. And then I'm going to flip this entire thing over. You can see there's my triangle still. I'm going to make a second triangle, which actually makes a larger triangle for you. So I flipped it over and had this fold here. I'm now going to meet in the middle and make another larger triangle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this whole thing over on itself, and we end up with a really nice point there. And then what we're going to do is tuck this under. So I tucked it under, and now we have this point. I'm going to flip this back over, and we're going to continue to do this on all of the sides. So I'm just going to, actually I'll do this one next. I'm going to do the same thing, only kind of opposite. I'm going to fold it down, make a point. You always want to fold to the outside from the center. So I'm going to take this again, fold it over, finger press it a little bit, flip the whole thing over. You can see where I folded it there. I'm now going to fold it again down into a larger triangle. As you can see, if you want, if you feel more comfortable, you can come in with your iron, kind of press it down. Then I'm going to fold this whole triangle in half again, making my point. Now this has an awful lot of excess fabric, so I know I don't want it to come below here because I'm going to tuck it in. So what I'm going to do is just trim this off before I tuck it. Then I'm just going to tuck that little tail in underneath. Again, I always like to come in and kind of tighten them again. after each point is made. I'm going to flip this now and I'm going to go to this side. Again, fold it down, flip it over, fold it in again, fold the entire triangle. I'm going to fold this tail down in there. That's another point. Flip it back over and do this side now. One triangle, fold into the outside, flip it over, making the larger triangle. Oops. Folding that whole triangle in half. Again, I'm going to trim this one, folding that tail underneath the fabric. So as you can see, we have two of the sides done. So I'm just going to continue folding, letting you watch as I do that, and I will fast forward it. And here we have an 8-point Scandinavian Christmas star. You can go through if you need to and kind of trim off any excess threads that may still be left over from that raw edge. But look at that. Isn't that pretty? And really easy. And you don't have to be able to sew, which I know sewing is a lot of times the thing that makes people say, well, I'm not going to do that. But here you can. You can make these all different sizes. They don't have to be this size. I've made some other ones that these are a little bit larger. I also have one that is a little bit smaller. So really you just need to increase the length of your strips if you want to make them a little bit larger or smaller. So yeah, that's how you make them. This is something that you could do if you have older kids who, you know, can fold. Really, that's all they have to be able to do. So I hope you go out and try to make some of these. If you want, what I will probably end up doing with these is just taking a little piece of ribbon and making a loop, either sewing it on or hot gluing it on, so that I can hang them on the Christmas tree or put them into a garland. You could do just about anything. So there you go, Scandinavian Christmas stars. Okay, we're on to our second ornament, and this one does involve a little bit of sewing, but it's not difficult. If you can sew in a curved line, you can do this one. So what we need are a couple of circles cut out of our fabric. So all I have done is taken a plate. This is about a little over 8 inches in diameter, and I've just cut out some circles. For this first one, you're going to need 2 different colored fabric circles. So I've taken, again, some coordinating Christmas fabric that I really like. And what we're going to do is we're going to place these right sides together. So you've got the wrong sides facing out, and you're just going to kind of line up your circle. It's not going to be perfect. As I say all the time, nothing is, and that's okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take about 1/4 of an inch seam, and we're going to go all the way around this, leaving about an inch, inch and a half on one edge. I guess there's not really an edge to a circle at one point in the circle, so that we can turn this inside right. I'm going to use my sewing machine for this. I suppose you could hand sew this if you wanted. It's going to take a little bit longer, but it's absolutely doable. So if you give me just a second, I'm going to zip over to my sewing machine and sew this, and I will be right back. Okay, so here are my two circles sewn together. As I said, it was about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance around there, and I've left a little bit of an opening here. And so a lot of people, when they sew, they'll come in and they will clip their curves. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. What it does is it allows, once you turn it inside right, it allows it to lay a little bit flatter. I'm not really worried about that, only because we're going to come in and we're going to iron this pretty flat. But some people are convinced that clipping the curves is very important. The most important thing for me is not to clip through the stitching line that you just made. So I'm now going to just turn this inside right, making sure that you don't rip out your seams. I've backstitched when I started and then when I ended, so they should be strong enough. But I'm just going to carefully turn that inside right. Pushing it all the way up to the seam that I sewed. Okay, and you end up with something that looks like this. Sometimes you have to go in and really kind of work those seams to make sure you're right up to the seam line. There you go. You have a two-sided different fabric circle. Now what I'm going to do is press this flat. So I've got my pressing mat, my favorite little iron. Again, making sure that I'm right up to the seam line so it's an actual circle and not an octagon or anything like that. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. So for this opening, I want to close this up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck this in because we're going to top stitch around the entire circle. So I'm just going to close that up, keeping that circle shape. I'm going to iron it. You also could pin it if you want, or I have these little clover clips that I really like. They're just tiny little, almost like little office binder clips that are pretty strong, and they hold things really, really well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my sewing machine, and I'm just going to take another 1/4 inch seam all the way around the outside to top stitch. It will catch the fabric that we folded in down here, so that this is all one complete circle. So again, give me just a second. I'll head to my machine and I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so as you can see, I just stitched a top stitch of about 1/4 of an inch around the edge of that. I don't know if you can see that or not. So our next step is actually a little bit of hand sewing. So I have a needle that I've just threaded some regular old polyester thread on it. And this is going to be really, really simple to do. So what you want to do is you're going to fold this in half. And which side you have up and which side you have down is really going to kind of determine what your end product looks like based on which fabric is showing more. I've decided that I want to have this starting up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this circle in half. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out the halfway mark, I guess, so I'll fold it again. And I'm just going to give a little press so that I know where that halfway mark is. And then I'm going to take my needle and thread and I'm going to start on the inside, and I'm just going to take a tiny little stitch at that halfway mark. I've got a knot in my thread, so it's going to stay. Then I'm going to go back down, staying right there again where that halfway mark is on this half circle, and go all the way through. So I'm going to then take it back through, and really I'm just tacking a couple of stitches down. You don't need very many. I'm going to go back through one more time. And then for this last one, I'm going to come through, but only go through the back side. So the needle comes up through the middle of the two sides. Now, you could go ahead and tie that into a knot and clip it off, but you're going to want to do some more sewing. So all I'm going to do is I'm now going to kind of spread this apart a little bit. And I can see, because I ironed, where that half mark is over here. And I'm going to take my needle and thread, and I'm going to come in from the inside. You can see how it's kind of threaded along there. I'm going to pull that so that I now have this side coming in up tight against these two. You're probably going to guess what I'm going to do next is I'm going to come all the way to this other side. I'm going to do the same thing. Just take a little stitch, and then I'm just going to pull it. You want to keep the thread on the inside. So as you can see, we have something that looks a little bit like a flower. Now what you want to do is you want to take a couple more stitches just to secure that. So I'm going to do exactly what I did on the first side. Go through a couple times. I'm going to come up through the middle. This time I am going to make a little bit of a knot so that all of that stays together. Just going to trim off that. We're done with all of the sewing for this now. But what we want to do now is we've got kind of this flower petal sort of configuration. What we want to do is kind of push it down, and we're going to make a square of the gray fabric. And at this point, it's kind of looking like some sort of appetizer you might get at a Chinese restaurant, a wonton or a crab rangoon. And so I'm again going to take my pressing mat, and once I have what looks like a pretty even-sided square, I'm going to come in and I'm going to flatten these a little bit here along these edges. So this is what it looks like now. And here's the really, really easy part. You're going to take these little looped flower petal sort of things, and you're just going to flatten them out a little bit and fold them over. Just like that. So again, I'm going to take this one, I'm going to fold it over. Going to do the same thing with the third one. Just going to fold it over. So we've got these little triangles on the back. Same with the fourth one. Now at this point, they're looking kind of messy. So what you want to do is you just kind of want to play with them to get them looking a little more even, a little more the same. And if you've got your fabric that's kind of crumpling up like mine is here, you might want to move your fold a little bit so that it's not pooling too much on your fabric that's made the square or the underside. So in some ways, while I think it looks like a flower petal or a wonton, it also looks a little bit like a bow or a package. So this is what you end up with. So that was not very difficult at all, was it? So what you can do also, because this has got a little bit of a raw edge, you could place something there. I have these little rhinestones that you could use a hot glue gun on. I don't know if you've ever seen these Ryobi glue guns, but these are the best glue guns I've ever experienced. They just hook on to the little batteries that my husband has for all of his Ryobi tools, and it heats it up pretty hot pretty quickly. The one thing I really like about it is that it doesn't have a lot of stringing of the glue. I don't know why that is, but it doesn't. It just takes a standard size glue stick. Whatever you can fit in there will work just fine. So you could come in, and I did not heat this up fast enough, so there's just a little bit of a dot. I just said there wouldn't be glue stringing, and there actually is. Sorry about that. And then you could just put that in the middle. You could use a button, you could use a tiny little bow, really anything that you wanted, you could add on to it, just to kind of cover up that raw edge. So there you go. There is ornament number 2. Now, if you wanted to hang this on your tree, obviously you would just take a little bit of ribbon and you could just hot glue it if you want on the back. You could glue it here. You could also just take a couple stitches like we did when we were sewing this all together, hand sewing it. Okay, on to number 3. Okay, ornament number 3 is going to be very similar to ornament number 2. They're going to look vastly different, but how you make them is very similar. So again, I've cut out 2 different circles of different fabrics, using my plate again for about an 8.5 inch or so diameter. We're going to take another step for this one, where I'm going to lay them together, and I want to fold them in half. And I'm going to press this really just to get the halfway line. And the reason I want that halfway line is because I'm going to cut these circles in half. So I'm going to take my ruler, lay it right against that line. Then I'm going to take my rotary cutter and just cut these in half. The guard back up on your rotary cutter, always very important, so you don't lose a finger or 2. So now we have 4 sides. We only need 2 of them for this particular project. So what we're going to do is exactly what we did before. On the second ornament, we're going to put the right sides together, and then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance around there, leaving a little bit of an opening so that we can turn this. So I'm going to head to my sewing machine and do that, and then I will be right back. Okay, as you can see, did the same thing as we did on the second ornament. Just came around with about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving a little bit of an opening so that I could turn this. So again, just turning this fabric inside right, inside out, inside right. Not sure which one it is. Once you've completely turned it, you're going to have a half circle with a different color fabric on each side. Sometimes to get these corners, I'll go ahead and use a pencil or something that's not sharp, but will push out your corners for you. Now I'm going to do exactly what I did before. Just press it flat. because I'm going to do another top stitch, I'm going to fold in the raw edges right along here, and we will catch those as we stitch. So I'm going to press that flat. Again, I could pin that opening or use a clover clip to do that. So now I'm going to run to my machine again, and I'm going to top stitch this about 1/4 inch all the way around. Okay, so I have top stitched all the way around. I said 1/4 inch, but it's probably not quite 1/4 inch, and that's okay. We just need the fabrics to stay together. So the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to lay this in front of you like this. So you've got half of it flat side on your left side. What you're going to do is you're going to begin folding. This is going to be a lot simpler than the folds we did for the first ornament. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this side, you're going to fold it over like that. So again, just go up, I don't know, maybe 3 inches and fold it over. Then you're going to fold it again right here, back the other direction. And you want to, when you fold this one, you want to make sure that you've got a point here. That fold, you want it at a point. Because what you're going to do is you're going to fold this one down into a point. So let's do that again. About 3 inches up, you're going to fold it over. Just a little past the edge, you're going to fold it back the other direction. And you're going to take what used to be the point of your circle, half circle, and fold it down. And in folding it this way, you have a tree. Now what you can do is go ahead and take a little bit of hot glue. Again, my Ryobi glue gun. Just a tiny little dot. That'll hold it down. Tiny little dot tucked in there as well. And then up in underneath here towards the tip. And hold those down. And you've made kind of an abstract tree. Now again, you could go in with your hot glue gun if you'd like. Add something to the very tip, a little bit of a star. Isn't that cute? Now you could do this with the same fabric. I actually did one with a kind of a test one with the same fabric, and I've not glued this one down. I just think it's a lot more interesting with the alternating fabrics this way. Again, you could stitch on a little piece of ribbon to hang it from your tree, hot glue a little piece of ribbon, either way. So there are our three ornaments. So we have kind of our abstract tree ornament. We have the second one we made, which looks like a package. And we have the first one we made, which is the Scandinavian fabric star. So I made all 3 of these in less than an hour. If you get a kind of an assembly line going, you could do these very, very quickly. And they'd be a lot of fun to do with friends. So I hope that you have enjoyed learning how to make some pretty easy fabric ornaments for your Christmas tree. So those weren't difficult at all, were they? I say that for most of my crafts because I don't do anything that's really, really difficult. If things are too difficult, it kind of takes the joy out of it for me. So that first ornament, again, was so easy to do, didn't have to sew a stitch. So just a little bit of folding and some ironing, and you have a gorgeous Scandinavian fabric star. The second one looked like a little package, as I mentioned. Just a tiny bit of sewing and a lot of folding. and a little bit of decorative bling, which makes everything a little bit better. And the third one I just really like. It's just a real simple little tree. And I love the fact that it's got the contrasting fabrics. So I really hope that you enjoyed this episode of Making Messes. I hope that you are in your Christmas crafting mode and that you are finding lots of things to make for the holiday season. Thanks again for joining me. Be safe, be well.